In this problem, we have a sign pyramid, and a cell gets a positive sign if the two cells below it have the same sign, and it gets a negative sign if the two cells below it have different signs. We can take this for example. Look at this. So it's positive because the two cells below it takes the same sign, and it's negative if the two cells below it takes different signs. Good, then we have a direct feeling of what this sign pyramid looks like. Now, the diagram below illustrates a sign pyramid with 4 levels. How many possible ways are there to fill the 4 cells in the bottom row to produce a positive sign at the top of the pyramid? And this is obviously a good example. This is a positive sign already, and this is one choice for the 4 cells on the bottom row. Good. But for this counting problem, the difficult part is to determine where shall we start the counting. And basically there are just 2 ways, right? A very straightforward way is to start from the bottom, because we want to consider the signs in the bottom row. However, this may not be a good choice. The reason is this: when you start from the bottom, there are lots of uncertainties here, right? We don't know what the cells should look like and what signs they should take. Certainly we can start with some guesswork, but that guesswork may work or may not work. It may not necessarily produce a positive sign on the top eventually, which means you have to restart your guesswork again. And that will be very costly and very expensive, because it will waste you a lot of time to mark down what you have tried and what you have not tried. And you have to be sure to cover all the possible cases. But on the other hand, if you start counting from the top to bottom, things will get a lot easier, because in contrary to the bottom, which is very uncertain, the top is certain, is definite. We know we want a positive sign here. Then it's like a tree. We can just branch out. We can just start our guessing, and by branching out the cells from the top to bottom. That's a determined way. That's a top to bottom way. Okay, let's start our work and you'll see how it looks. So in this scenario, we want this to be a positive sign, right? And then for the second row, we know that it has to be 2 positives, or it has to be 2 negatives. Good. This is certainly a way to do the casework. We have 2 cases in order to produce a positive sign on the very top. This is the very first row, or the top row. Now we can start to consider the third row, right? So for the third row, there are multiple cases. For the 2 positive signs in the second row, we can always start our counting from the very left cell in the third row. Let's say that's a positive sign or a negative sign. And actually the same thing for here, right? Even if the second row have 2 negative signs, the third row can still start with a positive sign or starts with a negative sign. And then let's see how it looks from the top to bottom, right? Let's start from here. So we have 2 positive signs here, and we want the first cell in the third row to be a positive sign. And then this has to take the same sign in order for this cell to be positive, right? And the same sign here as well for this cell to be positive. Therefore, the third row is deterministic, right? Then what if the first cell is a negative? I'll change color. What if the first cell, the very leftmost cell, is a negative sign? Then this has to be negative for this to be positive, right? And same for this cell, for this to be positive. Therefore, we have 3 negative signs. At this point, there are 2 ways you can go. You can finish the 4th row from here, or we can finish the second or third row. We can finish the fourth row, or we can finish the third row. So either way will work. The only thing you need to be careful is don't jump back and forth and do things systematically. All right, let's clean up the space, and we will do the third row first. As I said, this is not the only way to do it. So let's look at here. When the second row are two negative signs, and the third row starts with a positive, then the middle cell has to be negative, right? You have to alternate the sign to produce this negative. So this is negative. And then you have to alternate again to produce this negative. So that's that. That's a plus, minus, plus. And what if we start with a negative sign? Then again, for the same principle, you have to alternate this sign and then alternate this sign as well. So minus, plus, minus. Good. Now we complete the third row. Let's look at the fourth row, or the last row, what we care most, right? Good. In either case, we will start the logic thinking from this very leftmost cell. What if that is a positive or a negative, or positive or negative, or positive or negative, or positive or negative? Good. Let's start here. If the third row has 3 positive signs, and the fourth row starts with a positive sign, then this has to take the same sign. For this to be positive, same sign. For this to be positive, and same sign. For this cell to be positive. Therefore, 4 positive signs. And if we start with a negative sign, then all these cells has to take the same sign to produce all positive signs on the third row. So 4 negative signs. Good. And what if it's the other way? What if it's like the third row are 3 negative signs, and we start with a positive sign? Then we have to alternate it. We have to alternate it again, and alternate it for the third time in order to produce these negative signs. So we have positive, negative, positive, negative. It's also deterministic. And the same thing for this one. If we start with a negative sign, we have to alternate again, alternate a third time. So that's deterministic as well. Good. And what if the third row is plus, minus, and plus? If the third row is plus, minus, plus, and we start with a plus, then the second cell has to be the same sign for this to be positive. And then we alternate it for this. We stick to the same negative sign to produce this positive. So that's plus, plus, minus, minus. What if we start with a negative sign? Then we have to stick to the same sign to produce this, and then alternate it to produce this negative sign, and then stick to this positive for this positive sign. So it's minus, minus, plus, plus. All right. Let's look at the last subcase. When the third row is a minus, third row is a minus, plus, and a minus. In that scenario, if we start with a positive sign, then we have to alternate the sign to produce this, and then stick to it to get this positive sign, and then alternate it to get this minus sign. So it's plus, minus, minus, plus. Okay, we are almost done. In the last scenario, if we start with a negative sign, we have to alternate it to produce this, stick to it to produce this, and alternate it to produce this. So it's minus, plus, plus, minus. Good. Then we have all these 8 choices. They are all different, right? So the answer shall be C, 8. And one last point I want to make is this. Actually, in the actual exam, Once after you finish these two scenarios, you should have a very confident and legitimate guess that in all these cases, once the first cell is determined and the third row is determined, then that specific row, the last row, is deterministic, right? Therefore, we should be very confident to guess that this should be two choices and here two choices. So we can save, let's say, half of the work, and you should be confident to guess that C shall be the answer. And the only reason I want to complete all the work is to show you how it looks. Alright, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe the channel. If you have questions, please comment.